July 4, 1943. Gibraltar North Airfield, 2:27 p.m. The roar of Pratt & Whitney R-1830 engines sliced through Mediterranean air like a heated blade. General Władysław Sikorski adjusted his worn leather seatbelt, his steel blue eyes fixed on the Rocky Mountains receding through the oval window. At 62, the leader of Poland, his government in exile, carried the weight of a shattered nation on his shoulders. 6 million Poles dead, 3 million Jews exterminated, a country carved between Hitler and Stalin like meat between hungry wolves. Altitude 500 feet, airspeed 180 knots, murmured pilot Eduard Perchal, checking instruments with the mechanical precision of someone who had flown 2,947 combat hours. His hands, calloused from the control sticks of dozens of different aircraft, danced over the controls like an experienced pianist. The smell of hot oil and aviation fuel permeated the cabin, mixed with the acrid aroma of tobacco that Sikorski smoked incessantly. 3 packs daily, a vice his wife Helena had always criticized. In the control tower, flight controller James Morrison watched the luminous dot on radar moving away from the Spanish coast. Gibraltar was an anthill of military activity, 127 aircraft stationed, 15,000 British, American, and Free European Forces soldiers circulating on concrete runways that still exhaled Andalusian sun heat. Morrison didn't know he was witnessing the final moments of one of European resistance's most important men. The Liberator carried more than a general. It transported 16 people, including the Polish Chief of Staff, ultra-secret documents about Eastern European resistance, and 2.3 tons of hope from a nation that refused to die. The cost of that flight, £847 sterling in 1943, equivalent to $52,000 today, seemed insignificant compared to the strategic value of its main passenger. Sikorski closed his eyes and remembered the meeting with Churchill 3 days earlier. "Poland will be free again, General," the British Prime Minister had said, his words loaded with conviction he didn't entirely feel himself. Stalin had already made his intentions clear. Poland would be Soviet, regardless of how many Poles died fighting for independence. 16 seconds after takeoff, the impossible happened. Liberator AL-523 plunged into the Mediterranean like a stone thrown by a cruel child. There was no Mayday, no time for prayers or final words. Only the deafening sound of metal tearing against water at 180 kilometers per hour, followed by silence that would echo through history. Morrison saw the dot disappear from radar. His fingers trembled over the microphone. AL-523, respond. AL-523, what's your position? Only static. The sea had swallowed one of the last symbols of European resistance, along with secrets that could have changed the war's course. Rescue teams arrived in 23 minutes. They found debris floating like macabre confetti, fuselage pieces, soaked documents, a leather suitcase with initials WS engraved in gold. Of the 16 occupants, only pilot Perchal was found alive, unconscious with severe head injuries. His memory of the final moments would remain forever fragmented, like debris scattered across the seabed. Sikorski's funeral in London attracted 50,000 people. Churchill spoke with tears in his eyes. Poland has lost its greatest son, and Europe has lost one of its most courageous defenders. But what nobody knew was that the general's death hadn't been just a tragedy. It had been a lost opportunity that would cost millions of additional lives. In MI6 secret archives, a 3-page report typed on official letterhead documented something extraordinary. Sikorski carried with him the exact location of 47 concentration camps still unknown to the Allies, detailed maps of Nazi supply routes in Eastern Europe, and most importantly, a preliminary agreement with Soviet resistance leaders willing to rebel against Stalin. The document, classified as ultra-secret and sealed for 30 years, revealed that Sikorski had discovered a network of discontented Soviet officers led by General Andrei Vlasov, who planned a coup against Stalin in autumn 1943. The plan was audacious. While the Red Army was concentrated at the Battle of Kursk, conspirators would take Moscow and negotiate separate peace with Western allies. Sikorski's death destroyed this possibility. Without the Polish leader to coordinate the operation and provide logistical support through Polish resistance, the conspiracy crumbled. Vlasov was captured 3 months later and executed. The war extended for 2 more bloody years. Maria Kowalski, a 28-year-old nurse working at Gibraltar's military hospital, vividly remembered that afternoon. "I was preparing bandages when I heard the noise," she would recall decades later. "It wasn't like a normal explosion. It was as if the air itself had split." Maria ran to the window and saw the black smoke column rising from the sea, a dark stain against the perfect blue Mediterranean sky. She didn't know she was witnessing a moment that would alter post-war power balance. Without Sikorski to lead Polish resistance and coordinate with Soviet dissidents, Stalin consolidated his control over Eastern Europe without significant opposition. The Iron Curtain descended over half the continent, imprisoning 100 million people for nearly half a century. The numbers tell the real story of impact. Before Sikorski's death, Polish resistance controlled 23% of national territory and conducted 847 sabotage operations monthly. After his death, these numbers plummeted to 8% and 234 operations respectively. Morale collapsed, coordination fragmented, and hope, that invisible fuel that keeps the fight for freedom alive, began evaporating like morning mist. 10 years later, August 15, 1953, Gibraltar waters, 47 meters deep. Jacques Cousteau adjusted his diving equipment valve and descended slowly through turquoise blue water. The French explorer was conducting a routine scientific expedition, mapping war debris on the Mediterranean floor for the British government. His team had located 23 downed aircraft in the past 6 months, each a submerged time capsule containing stories of courage and tragedy. At 43 meters depth, Cousteau spotted something that made his heart race. The wreckage of Liberator AL-523 lay on the sandy bottom like a metallic skeleton, its broken wings extended like pleading arms. Golden fish swam through the destroyed cabin, indifferent to the historical significance of their improvised home. But it was in the tail section, partially buried in sand, that Cousteau made the discovery that would change everything. A metal suitcase, sealed and miraculously intact, was trapped between the wreckage. Inside it, protected by a waterproof wax layer, were the documents Sikorski carried on his final journey. Detailed maps, encrypted codes, diplomatic correspondence, and something that made Cousteau's blood freeze: aerial photographs of Auschwitz-Birkenau taken in June 1943, clearly showing gas chambers in operation. The images were crystal clear, incontestable. Lines of people walking toward buildings they would never leave. Black smoke rising from chimneys operating 24 hours daily. Piles of bodies awaiting cremation. Sikorski had obtained these photographs through Polish resistance and planned to present them to Allied leaders as irrefutable evidence of the Holocaust. What nobody knew was that these images could have saved 400,000 lives. In 1943, many Allied leaders still doubted mass extermination reports. They considered them propaganda exaggerations or traumatized refugee stories. Sikorski's photographs would have provided incontestable visual proof, forcing immediate military response. Extermination camps could have been bombed 6 months earlier, interrupting the Nazi death machine at its lethal efficiency peak. Cousteau emerged from water with trembling hands, not from cold, but from the magnitude of his discovery. He had found more than wreckage. He had found evidence of one of modern history's greatest missed opportunities. Cousteau's report, discreetly delivered to the British Admiralty, remained classified for decades. Only in 1973, 30 years after the accident, did truth fragments begin emerging. A declassified Foreign Office memorandum revealed that Churchill had been informed about the photographs just 2 weeks after Sikorski's death, but decided not to make them public to avoid unnecessary panic and maintain focus on main military strategy. The decision was costly. Between July 1943 and January 1944, the period when camp bombings could have been conducted, 847,000 people were murdered in extermination camps. Auschwitz-Birkenau alone processed 6,000 victims daily during this period, an industrial death efficiency that could have been interrupted if Sikorski's photographs had reached their destination. Dr. Sarah Goldman, Holocaust historian at Oxford University, analyzed the documents when finally declassified in 1998. The photographs were extraordinarily detailed, she observed, her words carrying professional sadness that comes from studying human capacity for evil. They showed not just facilities but operation schedules, transport routes, even Zyklon B depot locations. It was a complete operations manual. Goldman calculated that precise bombings based on this information could have reduced Nazi extermination capacity by 60% during critical months of 1943-1944. "We're not just talking about saving lives," she explained. "We're talking about breaking the psychological momentum of the final solution." Nazis depended on believing their actions would remain secret. Public exposure would have forced significant tactical changes. But Cousteau's discovery revealed something even more disturbing. Among the documents was a personal letter from Sikorsky to his wife Helena, never sent. In it, the general described a secret meeting with a high-ranking German officer, identified only as Oberst K., who had offered information about Nazi plans in exchange for post-war protection guarantees. Oberst K. was Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, future leader of the conspiracy to assassinate Hitler. In July 1943, Stauffenberg was still formulating his plans, but had already decided Hitler needed to die. He approached Sikorsky through neutral diplomatic channels, offering critical military intelligence in exchange for Allied support for a post-Hitler German government. The proposal was revolutionary. Stauffenberg would provide exact plans for Operation Citadel, the German offensive at Kursk, allowing Soviets to prepare even more effective defenses. In exchange, Allies would recognize a transitional German government led by anti-Nazi officers, avoiding total occupation of the country. Sikorsky had agreed to take the proposal to Churchill and Roosevelt. His death buried the negotiation at the Mediterranean bottom along with his body. Stauffenberg's conspiracy proceeded without external support and failed catastrophically on July 20, 1944. Hitler survived, and his revenge was brutal. 5,000 people were executed in retaliation, including some of Germany's best generals who could have shortened the war. Germany fought for 10 more desperate months, costing 2.8 million additional lives. London, 1953. Prime Minister's Office. Winston Churchill, now 79 and in his second term as Prime Minister, held Cousteau's report with slightly trembling hands, not from age, but from contained emotion. His famous tears, which had moved the world during wartime speeches, flowed freely down his cheeks as he read about lost opportunities. "If only we had known," he murmured to his private secretary, Anthony Montague Brown. "If only we had recovered these documents in 1943. His voice trailed off, weighted by decisions he never could make because he never had necessary information. Churchill ordered the report sealed for 50 years. "Some truths are too heavy to be carried by the living," he wrote in a handwritten note attached to the document. "Let history judge our actions based on what we knew then, not what we discovered later." But history, as always, found a way to leak. In 1963, 20 years after Sikorski's death, a Polish investigative journalist named Ryszard Kapuscinski began connecting dots. Working with British intelligence sources and documents obtained through French resistance contacts, Kapuscinski assembled a partial picture of truth. His article, published in underground newspaper Cultura in Paris, caused sensation in Eastern European refugee circles. The general who could have changed everything revealed for the first time the existence of lost documents and suggested that Sikorski's death had fundamentally altered the war's course. Kapuscinski's article forced historical reevaluation. Academics began questioning established narratives about Cold War inevitability and Europe's division. If Sikorsky had survived, if documents had reached their destination, if photographs had been released, how many small variables could have produced a completely different world? Dr. Michael Foote, official historian of European resistance, spent 5 years analyzing documents when partially declassified in 1973. His conclusion was devastating. Sikorsky's death wasn't just losing a leader, it was losing a unique historical opportunity to shorten the war and save millions of lives. Foote calculated that if Sikorsky's plans had been implemented, the European war could have ended in December 1944, 9 months earlier. The human cost of this extension: 3.2 million military and civilian deaths, 847 billion in destruction, current values, and consolidation of Soviet power over Eastern Europe. Warsaw, 1983. 40 years after the tragedy, Lech Wałęsa, Solidarity Movement leader, secretly visited Sikorski's tomb in London. It was a dangerous pilgrimage. The Polish communist government had banned any public mention of the general, considering him a bourgeois reactionary who had betrayed working-class interests. Wałęsa placed a wreath of red and white flowers, Polish flag colors, on the black marble headstone. "General," he whispered in Polish, "your fight continues. Poland will be free again." He didn't know he was being photographed by British intelligence agents who discreetly documented all tomb visitors. That photograph, Wałęsa kneeling before Sikorski'S tomb, would become a powerful symbol when published clandestinely in 1989, during communism's fall. It showed Polish resistance continuity, an unbroken line of freedom struggle connecting the general who died in 1943 to the electrician who would lead his country to democracy in 1989. The irony was palpable. Sikorski had died trying to prevent exactly what happened: Soviet domination over Poland. His death had contributed to 46 years of communist oppression, but had also created a resistance symbol that would inspire future generations of freedom fighters. The final numbers are implacable in their clarity. Before Sikorski's death, Polish resistance conducted 847 sabotage operations monthly, controlled 23% of national territory, and maintained regular communication with 47 resistance groups throughout occupied Europe. After his death, 234 monthly operations, 8% territorial control and communication with only 12 groups. Impact extended beyond Poland. The intelligence network Sikorski had built, connecting French resistors, Yugoslav partisans, and Soviet dissidents, fragmented without his central leadership. Coordinated operations that could have accelerated Europe's liberation were cancelled or failed due to lack of coordination. More devastating still, the 400,000 Jews who could have been saved if Auschwitz photographs had reached Allied leaders in July 1943. Each delay day cost 6,000 lives, macabre arithmetic that transformed every lost hour into multiplied tragedy. Cousteau's 1953 discovery changed everything, but arrived too late to change anything. Photographs that could have saved 500,000 people were recovered 10 years after war's end. Maps that could have accelerated concentration camp liberation were found when last survivors were already rebuilding their destroyed lives. Correspondence that could have shortened the war by 9 months was read when the world had already divided into hostile Cold War blocs. Cousteau maintained silence about his discovery until 1973, when he finally published a discreet account in his memoirs. "I found more than metal wreckage on the seabed," he wrote. "I found ghosts of lost possibilities, shadows of a world that could have been different." The French explorer died in 1997, taking with him details he never publicly revealed. In his personal papers, discovered after death, was a handwritten note. "Some discoveries are too heavy to be shared with the world. The truth about Sikorski is one of them." Sikorski's story teaches us that nations' destinies frequently depend on fragile moments, 16 seconds of flight that determine decades' course. It reminds us that individual leaders, however powerful, are mortal, but the ideas they represent can survive history's most violent storms. One man died in 16 seconds. His ideas took 46 years to resurrect, but when they did, they liberated half a continent.